Revenge inspired short selling, not a need for market efficiency and liquidity. But some say short selling doesn't even do that. They say short selling only ever leads to more volatility and crashes. They blame the 2010 flash crash on high-frequency trading and short sellers. They say the 2008 financial crisis was subprime mortgages, credit default swaps, and well, short sellers. Is that really true? Was betting against the market in the late 2000s the primary reason shareholders lost $8 trillion? Even if it did, many will defend it. They'd say short selling is the best way for the little guy to stick it to the fat cats. Look at GameStop. They say average Joes pulled a fast one on billionaires by playing them at their own game. Melvin Capital was one of the prominent hedge funds shorting GameStop. But after getting trolled by users on the Robinhood app, they lost around $6 billion before closing their doors for good. That's bad news for the guys at the top, but for the guys at the bottom, they feel like it's justice being served. And it's exactly what Isaac Le Maire would have wanted. He was the guy who inadvertently created short selling when he was trying to take on one of the biggest companies on the planet. But like many guys trying to gamble on the stock market, he should have quit when he was ahead. In the end, he lost everything. Money, family, honor. Or did he? Maybe he did defeat the Dutch East India Trading Company and other too-big-to-fail corporations. He just didn't do it in his lifetime. Isaac Le Maire was a natural-born merchant. When he entered the world in 1558 to 1559, he became the latest member of a merchant family. 3 of his brothers were successful entrepreneurs, but Isaac learned the tricks of the trade from his brother-in-law. By the time he was 25, he had been registered as a successful grocer. His wealth and success would eventually be enough to support 22 children. That's a lot of nannies to pay, diapers to buy, and private education to bankroll. Maybe Isaac's early taste of success inspired him to franchise his gene pool. It certainly seems that Isaac wasn't one to choose a comfortable life. Clearly, he wanted more, even when everything was telling him to play it safe. For example, Isaac grew up in the city of Antwerp in the Spanish Netherlands, or as we call it in the modern age, Belgium. Antwerp was a vital distribution center for Northern Europe. Isaac didn't just have trading in his blood, he'd have it on his doorstep. He was so intertwined with life there that he captained a company of the militia as a side hustle. By day, he was a trader. By night, he was a city defender. At least in theory. That moonlighting gig came crashing down during the Dutch Revolt. One of the defining battles of the 80 Years' War was the fall of Antwerp in 1585. Turns out, Isaac was better at selling fruits and vegetables than leading a militia, judging from how the richest, most populated city in the Netherlands went from a rebel stronghold to being captured by the Spanish. He fled from the northern Netherlands and eventually settled in Amsterdam to raise a family. Many would have taken early business success and a brush with death as a reason to take things easy, but Isaac always had bigger plans. He saw how the uprising against Spain and the eventual establishment of an independent Dutch Republic was ushering in a new era. Whenever there are borders to be redrawn, there is new trade to be found. In the wake of shifting tides, he founded a trading company with a couple of business friends to carry Baltic grains and timber to Spain from Russia. It was 1599, or maybe 1600, depending on who you asked. The company was called the Brabant Company, or at least that's what it would be called once it translated from 17th century Dutch. Other items they traded included wax, fur, and caviar, sought-after goods for high-paying customers. But they also held a major position in the fish trade between British and Spanish ports. These premium ventures carried risk, politically, geographically, and commercially. But to Isaac, there was no risk without reward, and he was right. Their 2 voyages were so successful that the company yielded a 400% return on its investment, but even that still wasn't enough for Isaac to be happy. A new market was opening, one that would be even more lucrative than the trade routes funding the upbringing of the 22 kids. It started with Cornelius de Houtman. He made the first successful Dutch expedition to the East Indies. He pulled it off in 1597, when he and a few other Amsterdam merchants returned with a huge cargo of valuables. Even though this happened a few years before Isaac's company was formed, it's worth emphasizing how information traveled slower back then, especially when it concerned profitable spice markets, top-secret trade routes, and intel on foreign powers. Heck, back then, people didn't even know these places existed. An average person wouldn't be able to independently verify which stories were rumors and hearsay and which were bona fide business opportunities. In time, Isaac would utilize these channels of communications to his advantage. But for now, let's focus on how Isaac learned that brave merchants had acquired enough maps, expertise, and firepower to break into the emerging market. No way was Isaac Lemaire going to pass up this opportunity, but his decision to go all in had devastating consequences. Not just for his bank account and family, but also for the future of economics and business 500 years after his death. So, it's time to learn how history works as we measure the rise and fall of Isaac Lemaire, inventor of short selling. This week's video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Now available for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. In War Thunder, you can command over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, ranging from the biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to today's fighter jets and main battle tanks. Immerse yourself in intense combat with incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects. War Thunder features one of the most sophisticated vehicle damage models in gaming. Every vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components, which are all susceptible to damage or disabling enemy fire. The game also offers impressive X-ray view, showing exactly what happens when a vehicle is destroyed. Whether you prefer fast-paced matches or ultra-realistic simulations, War Thunder has a mode for you. Customize your vehicles with countless camouflages, historical markings, and decorations, including community-created ones. You don't need extra hardware. Drive any tank and fly any aircraft with just your mouse and keyboard or controller, even in simulator mode. Thanks to the heavily optimized Dagger engine, War Thunder delivers impressive visuals and high frame rates even on lower-end machines. Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using my link in the pinned comment or video description. New and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. This offer is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. The race was on. Britain had already created its own East Indies trading company in 1600, so Dutch entrepreneurs had to move fast to get a foothold in the East Indies, especially if it was only a matter of time until the likes of Portugal entered the market. Trading companies had to mobilize, and fast. But there was a problem. Growth was impeded by the custom of liquidating a company after a single voyage. Of course, some companies had a few vessels on their books, but in general, the practice was used as a form of security or insurance for the bankrollers. So, in a bid to leapfrog ahead, Isaac Lemaire merged his company with the same one that had hired Cornelius' successful voyage. This would enable the new company to mitigate enough risk for a few more voyages. However, merging with a reputation as strong as Cornelius's wasn't going to be enough. Competitors had also been merging with each other. Isaac would have to monopolize the Dutch industry before he could even try to take on Britain and Portugal in the trade wars. Thankfully, he wasn't the only one to see where this was going. In 1602, statesman and revolutionary Johann von Oldenbarnevelt set out a bold idea. He'd spent the last few years undergoing special diplomatic missions to King Henry IV of France and Queen Elizabeth I of England. With his inside scoop on rival empires, he was perfectly placed to persuade the 6 large trading companies to amalgamate into one big super company, the Dutch East India Trading Company, or as it's known by the Dutch abbreviation, the VOC. But unlike the British counterpart, it would sell ownership in stock at inception. By using wealthy investors to grow the company straight away and not rely exclusively on state funding, the VOC had a real shot at bringing the idea to scale. All they needed was some rich merchants with some naval experience to buy up some stocks. No surprises for guessing that Isaac Lemaire was eager to get in on this investment deal. He became the largest shareholder when he bought 85,000 Dutch guilders worth of stock. Today, that would be closer to $1.6 million. Although some think his brother-in-law helped him raise the full amount, he did have creditors, and it would be a fitting way to pay back the guy who got you into the business in the first place. The result was the VOC was capitalized at 4 times the size of the British East India Company. When its 21-year charter was granted on March 20, 1602, it had 6.4 million guilders in the bank. Adjusting for inflation, that's around $125 million. Give or take a couple $100,000. From that point on, Isaac Lemaire was one of the most successful merchants on the planet, and the biggest investor of what was going to be one of the world's biggest companies ever. Annual profit started at 6 million guilders, which means Isaac made back his investment practically straight away. The VOC reached its peak in 1799 with stock worth 78 million guilders. That's almost $8 trillion today. In fact, the VOC was so ahead of its time that the existence of the first publicly traded corporation predated an official stock exchange. Deals were made with the sellers and buyers, announcing prices and solidifying trades with hand slaps and high fives. Before long, commoners were investing in the VOC. As the company grew, Isaac Lemaire became a governor in the company, which gave him greater control and insights into the running of this money-making behemoth. Unfortunately, Isaac wanted more. Or at least, that's the reason the VOC gave for kicking him out. We can't know for sure the exact details, because each side has a different version of events. Isaac would say that the tension with the VOC started with the expeditions of Wiebrand von Verbeck. In 1602, he led a fleet of 14 ships and 1 yacht. Of the company directors on board this expedition, one was Isaac. Apparently, Isaac saw how the malpractice of the company was affecting the bottom line. He had already been garnering something of a reputation as a corporate activist by challenging the head honchos over their poor management and lack of transparency. But something on Wiebrand's voyage was the straw that broke the camel's back. It can't be verified what he precisely saw that made him feel like he was losing money, but Isaac let his anger be known. In 1609, he filed a petition to liquidate the VOC in accordance with the standard business practice. In response, the VOC kicked him out. His stake in the company and position as governor didn't grant enough voting power to survive an ousting from the board. He would argue that the ensuing litigations were a result of the VOC not wanting to be held accountable for screwing investors out of profits. He was the largest shareholder after all, so it makes sense for this to be his motivation. However, the VOC's version of events is that all these accusations of mismanagement were phony. Their version is that Isaac was caught cooking the books. Allegedly, he had taken expenses without providing adequate receipts. For example, he undertook 14 expeditions under his own accounts instead of the company's, which meant any money he pocketed was embezzlement. The sheriff fined him 1,200 guilders, about $46,000, which became a strong pretext for the VOC to expel him. Not only that, but limits were put on how much of his stock Isaac could take out. As part of the exit deal, Isaac signed, or was forced to sign, an agreement to not become a competitor. That meant he couldn't run a trading company in the East Indies, and certainly not from Dutch soil. He was a merchant banned from trading. For the moment, Isaac wouldn't try to find a loophole, because he had another revenge plan to put into action. His only way to get back into trading would be to take down the VOC and force it to liquidate. His plan to do this was through a different form of trading. If the whole drama started over stock value, then he was going to make sure it ended over stock value. His idea was simple: use the bridge. As a merchant, he was familiar with how the gossip amongst traders had been a fantastic way to gather insight and tips. This time, he was going to use the back channels against the VOC. He hired hoodlums and set up the Groot Company, which translates to large company, and sent them to spread misinformation on the bridge where the stocks were being traded. Rumors included things like boat sinking, attacks by British vessels, and spices being ruined by leaks. This is the first example of a bear raid because he was specifically targeting a company to sink the share price. Lemaire and his Groot Company crew sold naked shorts or shares that they didn't own, which put downward pressure on the VOC's share price. To explain short selling, imagine borrowing your friend's PlayStation, then selling it for $400. 3 months later, your friend wants it back, so you buy it for $300. So you make a $100 profit. Naked shorts are like that, except you don't even borrow the PlayStation. You just agree to sell a PlayStation for $400 but promise to deliver it later. Then you hope the price drops to $300 so you can make a profit. In this case, Lemaire promised to sell shares at a certain price and deliver them at a later date, but wanted to drive the share price much lower so that when he delivered those shares, he could make the big bucks. Given all this happened almost 60 years before Isaac Newton discovered gravity, we can cut ourselves some slack when it comes to the definitions. What's important is that by the time anyone figured out the truth, Isaac would have done enough damage to the company to either make his money back or sink his rivals for good. If they'd been stealing from him by overvaluing the stock, then it was only fair that he lowered their stock price to pocket the difference. But this plan backfired, big time. Firstly, the type of investors who'd be on the bridge were the types of investors who didn't care about the day-to-day fluctuations of stock value. All they cared about were the yearly payouts. The types of shareholders who might care about day-to-day fluctuations would be the same governors who knew the books well and had the direct lines of communication to verify rumors. Still, the VOC didn't want to risk any blowbacks, so they announced an early payout of corn. Any investor who might be scared enough to dump stocks was placated with a few ears of maize. So, not only had Isaac helped create shareholding, corporate activism, and short selling, he'd now set the standard for dividends. To make matters worse, the VOC sought the government's help when they figured out what Isaac was up to. During their government petition to ban the practice, they said the real victims of Isaac's conspiracy were not the fat cats, but the widows and orphans who had invested everything they had into the company. It's bad enough having a thieving troublemaker's reputation, but being known as a guy who bullies widows and orphans? Dang. That was going to sour any future business prospects. The government agreed with the VOC, if only because they had a vested interest in keeping the company afloat. In response, they outlawed naked short sales. From now on, the government decreed any speculation against a company's value needs some proof. So now, Isaac had inadvertently created regulation. That's not a bad record for a businessman. Well, unless we count how it financially ruined him. The government ruling meant everyone became aware of Isaac's scheme and kept away. As a result, he lost somewhere between $10 and $20 million. Whatever that is in guilders, it would have been a lot less than what he stood to lose from the VOC lining their pockets. However, Isaac saw himself as a man of honor. Even when he was exiled to a seaside town, he conspired to take down the VOC once and for all. First, he tried to get a freelance gig advising France on how to set up their own East Indies trading company. He knew the infrastructure, the corporate accounting, and the merchant trade routes. But the project with the French monarch never got off the ground. Maybe France thought the market was oversaturated, or didn't want to risk the wrath of the VOC by infringing on their contract with Isaac. In the end, Jean-Baptiste Colbert found the French East India Company, though it's possible he used part of Isaac's initial plans. Isaac's next revenge plot would be his last. He set up the Australian Company, or at least that's what it would be called when translated from 17th century Dutch. By basing the company in the United Provinces, Isaac could argue that he wasn't breaking his competition agreement with the VOC, at least until the VOC got some good lawyers. But direct competition wasn't the main objective. He knew they were too big to take on face to face. What he wanted to do is take advantage of the trade routes. If he could find a safe route through the Drake Passage, then potentially he could devalue the entire company's value in one fell swoop. That way, he would be the go-to guy for all new trade. His son Jacob was put in charge of the expedition and ordered not to conduct any trade when passing through VOC waters. Although this was part of a ruse. Isaac knew that the VOC would question Jacob, which gave his son a chance to sweet-talk Governor General Gerald Reinst. Reinst had participated in the earlier Brabant Company, so would likely look favorably on Isaac's plan to find a new trade route. Reinst's support of his old colleague might even sow dissent within the VOC. Eventually, after a few talks and one marriage proposal from Jacob to Reinst's daughter, the Le Maire expedition was permitted to carry on. Soon, Jacob successfully discovered a way through the notoriously dangerous Drake Passage. To commemorate the success, he named it Cape Horn. But on returning home, the rest of the VOC heard how Isaac had pulled some strings and found some loopholes to get through their territory. After porting at Amsterdam, Isaac's son was arrested and the ship was confiscated. A legal case ensued between Isaac and the VOC once again. But this time, Isaac won. Sort of. The court ruled that Isaac was not breaking any rules by traveling through the VOC trade routes to get to Cape Horn. He also received a tidy compensation and got his ship back. Tragically, this was in vain. Jacob died during the return voyage. To make matters worse, the VOC simply played Isaac at his own game and moved their own ships into the new trade routes. What else could Isaac do? His new venture was nothing compared to the huge Dutch East Indies trading company. And now he'd lost one of his children in his never-ending revenge mission. A few years after this incident, Isaac Le Maire died on September 30th, 1624. His tombstone reads, "A merchant for more than 30 years. Blessed by the Lord. He gained a lot of money and lost it all, except for his honor." No doubt, people of his time contest that final point. Isaac was a privileged man who was never satisfied with his wealth, spearheaded the creation of an impressive corporation, and even resorted to playing dirty tricks when he got bitter. His grudge cost him fortune, reputation, and the lives of countless people, including his son. But some say Isaac did die with honor. Despite his misgivings, sacrifices, and mistakes, he created business practices and principles which protect everyone today. From average Joes investing in companies to regulators holding boards of directors accountable. They would say he was framed by the VOC when he saw them lining their pockets. It was surely the VOC who were robbing widows and orphans. Through that lens, Isaac spent his life trying to break up a monopoly, inadvertently created new trade routes, and even helped form vital legal frameworks to rein in and punish corporate misbehavior. So sure, Maybe his invention of short selling did, centuries later, contribute to market crashes. But it was also his sense of fairness and honor that gave normal people the tools to stick it to the fat cats. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using my link in the pinned comment or video description. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles and other goodies. Available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss it. Now, there are two sides to every story, and if you want to hear the side of the VOC, make sure you watch our video on that. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how history works.